Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to my channel. It's True Crime with Jess Rose. I am here every Tuesday and Thursday at 8 p.m. Tuesdays are my request evening. Thursdays are stories that I like to bring to you. I'm also over on TikTok, which is Jess Rose 5472, or you can join my Patreon. It's patreon.com/Jess Rose 5472, or you can subscribe. I'd really appreciate that. And then finally, now that I've got all that out of the way, you could just watch. I'd appreciate that just as much. So, okay, this evening's story is the horrific Emani Moss Story. Okay, it genuinely is. It's an awful case, as they all are. As I always say that, I feel like I'm just a broken record, but it really is. It's awful. Not a story I knew a lot about, which is what I like to bring to you on a Thursday. And yeah, it's, as I put in the title, it is, I didn't realise this was the name for it. I've heard of scapegoating within a family. I've heard of that term being used, but I haven't heard of the Cinderella effect. I've heard of bystander effect, but I haven't heard of Cinderella effect. Well, I have, due to this story, and that's what this is based on. Okay, so we've got Emani Gabrielle Moss, born the 23rd of April 2003. Okay, in Georgia, so it's an American story. All right. Now, her mum, Danita Leaks, her dad, Emani Moss. Okay, so you can tell she's named after her dad. We've got Emani, we've got Iman. So I've heard people pronouncing her dad's name slightly different, just so there's no confusion. I don't think there'd be a confusion. You've got Emani, you've got Iman. Quite obviously male and female, but so she's definitely named after her dad, bless her. Okay. Now, not long after she was born, I believe she's the youngest to Danita, only child to Iman, but youngest of 5 children to Danita. Okay, now Danita, she had a severe drug addiction. Okay, and it said that very soon after little Emani was born, she surrendered all parental rights to Iman. Okay, so he was given sole custody of his little girl pretty much straight away. All right, very sad. She let down by her own mum before she even got to know her, but based on the fact that I believe her drug addiction was so severe, she obviously saw it as the right decision. I don't know about the other 5 children who would be Imani's half siblings. I don't know about those children, so I can't comment any more on those. Okay, now Emani herself, beautiful little girl, stunning little smile on her, gorgeous. Would loved her hair, and loved to have it in these pretty little braids. Sweet, kind. She was loved by Iman originally, and all of her paternal family, which is obviously Iman's family. And it just said, yeah, she was just a really sweet little girl, very clever, quite outgoing, and just a really sweet little girl. If you see the pictures of her, beautiful little princess. Okay, now as Imani got older, okay, Iman would bring her to church with him, and this was called the Freedom Christian Church. Okay, now Iman has been single since he's gained sole custody of Imani. I believe if there was any little flings in between, I'm not aware of them, but as for relationships, he hadn't. He'd remained single. Okay, so during one of these times that while they were at church, one of Iman's friends introduces him to a woman called Tiffany. Okay, Now, Tiffany, let me tell you a little bit about her. She's a preschool teacher, quite an intelligent lady. Seemed to be everything that Iman could want. She was church going, quite settled. Like I say, had this career. Being a preschool teacher, he thought, well, what's more ideal, with my little daughter? This was around 2007. So at this point, Imani's about 4. And after a few dates, he begins to introduce Imani to Tiffany, Tiffany to Imani, should I say. And it all seemed to go well at first. Okay, so they end up getting married in July of 2009. And at this point, Imani's age, she's about 6. Okay, well, she is 6, sorry. And as a couple, they do go on to have 2 children in quite quick succession. They have a little boy and then a little girl. I am aware of their names. Again, I'm not mentioning their names. I don't need to. So it's not relevant to the story at all. Okay. Now, but it was said that Imani absolutely doted on her half siblings. Absolutely doted on them. While she's in school, she'd talk about her little brother, and then when her sister came along, because they are half siblings. I've seen elsewhere where they're called step siblings. They're not, because these 2 children are Iman's children. As far as I know, everywhere I've looked. So I don't know why in some places I've seen their step siblings. So I'm just going to put that out there. But as far as I'm aware and everything I found, they are Iman's and Tiffany's biological children, which would make them Imani's half siblings. Okay, so now this should have been really the start of an amazing life for the once single dad and daughter. That's what it should have been. However, it's not that channel. We all know it's not that channel. Okay, unfortunately, right? But it turns out Tiffany she'd never been happy with bringing up what as she saw someone else's child, even though it's her new husband's child, because he didn't have Imani with her. I'm assuming it's no, I want no part of this, and it starts to become quite, it wasn't straight away, obviously. I think at the beginning, he wouldn't have ventured into a relationship with Tiffany, and certainly not married her, if this had have come across earlier on. But what she would do, while Iman was at work, she would complain about Imani's behaviour. Basically, most of it relating to homework, and that she wouldn't do her homework. Let me let you know, Imani's 6. She's 6 years old. But she would complain that she wasn't doing as she was told, type deal. Okay. So we get to March 2010. Now, like I say, she's age 6. Okay. Now, Imani, while she's in school, she becomes visibly upset when she's given her report card. Okay. And she goes to confide in the school nurse. Now, this is what I mean about this little girl. She's only 6. She knows exactly how to speak for herself and to put things across. And she goes to talk to the school nurse, and she basically says she's scared to bring her report card home, and she doesn't want to. And of course, the school nurse is like, well, why? What do you mean? And she says she's scared that she'll be hurt, that she'll be beaten for bringing this so-called bad report card home. Now, the only negative thing on the report card, I believe, was relating to homework. Now, she's 6 years old, okay, and apparently Tiffany's gripe was also related to homework. But when you're 6, you need help with that homework. You don't just get on and get on with it yourself. You need help. You need guidance. You need advice. And so when the homework wasn't coming in or wasn't correct or whatever it was, this showed up on her report card, like I say. So when she advised the school nurse that she, how frightened she was, she'd be hurt, she'd be beaten, she then went on to tell the nurse that her stepmom, Tiffany, she'd hit her, she'd beat her with like a curtain rod. A curtain rod. She's 6. And also the buckle end of a belt. So, how many times do we hear that? The buckle end. Why are you hitting your kid with a belt anyway? But then just for the extra, let's do it from the buckle end, shall we? So when the nurse looks at Emani and she wants to check if she's okay, she sees that little Emani has got welts and bruises and abrasions all over her little frame. Okay, she's not a big girl, Emani, but she's the size of a 6-year-old. She's what you see as a 6-year-old, but she's quite a small frame, and she's just got bruises all over her. Like I say, welts on a 6-year-old's little body. And these injuries were on her back, on her arms, on her chest, on her shoulders, on her legs. This girl had been beaten top to bottom. What, because she couldn't understand her homework? Because this wasn't because of the report card. The report card hadn't even made it home yet. This was somehow related to homework. I mean, just ridiculous. So the nurse goes ahead and reports this to social services, child services, the equivalent of that in Georgia. Okay. Now, Tiffany's arrested. She's arrested and she's charged with 1st-degree child cruelty. This is how bad these injuries must have been. Okay. Now, I agree that this should be done every time, but we don't always hear that, do we? That they're actually arrested and charged. But this did happen, okay? Now, Tiffany's excuse from her part is, well, it only happened 2 or 3 times. Now, my mum was actually at work, and he received a call from the police station basically saying, we've got your daughter here, we've arrested your wife. So he's kind of blindsided because Eman works a lot of hours, and I don't know if he was choosing to turn a blind eye. I don't know if he agreed with this sort of discipline, but he insinuated he was shocked about it. Okay, so Tiffany pleads guilty, all right? And because she pled guilty, she's given 5 years probation, and her and Iman have to complete parenting classes. She has to complete anger management classes and so forth. But what also happens, if you remember, I did tell you that Tiffany was a preschool teacher. Well, she loses her job. Of course she does. How can she be in charge of someone else's children when she's beating a child at home? She loses her job. Oh, wow. If Tiffany had something out for Emani beforehand, she really does now. She doesn't take this well at all. Okay, so when Emani had been taken to the police station, though, when all of this happened, she was actually sent to live with her paternal grandmother, who's called Robin Moss. That's Eman's mum. Okay? Now, Robin loved Emani. Absolutely loved her. And she took her in, and, Emani's, they said at school she started to thrive. Her whole behaviour started to change. She was much more upbeat. She was much more calm and comfortable. You know, she wasn't so tense. It was going really well with her living with her grandmother, and she did so for the next 6 months. Okay. And you might be like, well, why can't she just stay there? You know, she's happy. Tiffany obviously doesn't want her there. She doesn't want her there. She's happy with her own children, because when all this happened, the police did, you know, investigate her other two children, her biological children, if you like, and they were fine, perfectly healthy, not a mark on them. These children were very well looked after. Okay. So it's just quite obvious Tiffany doesn't want her there. Emani doesn't want to go back, but Iman, he fights to get Emani back. He wants his daughter back. And he talks to his mom and everything else. And his mom, Robin, she's like, just leave her here. You know, you've got the two kids there. You know, just, she's happy. Just leave her here. You can come and visit her here, but just leave her. Now, when mom put it across that he felt he had something to prove to his mom. I don't understand that. You know, it was to prove that he could do it. What, you could do what? Yeah, I don't know. Was it a guilt that he'd allowed this to happen to his daughter? I don't know. All I've heard, and it was actually out of his own mouth, was, I felt I had to prove this to my mum. It was kind of an ego thing. Okay. So now we get to September of 2010. At this point, Emani's 7. All right. Now, Tiffany, as I've said, 100% blames Emani for her losing her job. No accountability. Not, oh my God, I was being entrusted, you know, as a career for looking after other people's children, and I proved that I'm not capable of that, and that's why I've lost my job, and I'm going to do better. No. Nothing to do with her. It's Emani's fault. She should have kept her mouth shut. Should have just done her homework. It wouldn't have happened. This is kind of the mentality she was coming at it from. My God. Now, Emani is, after about 6 months, is returned to Iman and Tiffany. Now, as Tiffany's now out of work, which she is, and she doesn't return to work, she then becomes a stay-at-home mom. Okay. Iman is required. He now needs to do 2 jobs, because they're no longer a two person. It's not a 2-person household. How do you say that? How do you word that again? A 2. You know what I mean? You know, a 2 career household. I'm not too sure. I know what the word's in. Anyway, he has to get 2 jobs in order for them to be able to live. Okay. Now, this was Iman's schedule. Sounds crazy. It was said under oath, so I'm assuming it's correct. But he would get up at 5 a.m. He would go to work. He would get back at 4:30 p.m. All right. He would be at home for about half an hour, 45 minutes. He would then leave for his second job at around 5 p.m, just after, and then he wouldn't get home till about 1 a.m. So if we're to believe that, this guy was working 19 to 20 hours a day. So then when he would get home, he was getting, 4 hours sleep before he'd get up and he'd start the whole thing again. All right? But he did only work Monday to Friday. All right? So he would see Emani at the weekends. Okay? Now, because he was at work so much and for it's such long hours, he left all the childcare to Tiffany. Not only of his 2 children he's had with her, but Emani as well. I don't know why he trusted her. I don't know what she said to him to excuse the welts and the bruises and the abrasions that were all over Emani. I don't know what excuses he made to himself or she made to him that made him think Emani would be safe with him being out of the house for 20 hours a day and completely entrusting his child to this woman. I know it's his wife. I don't care. Okay? So, now, although she's entrusted with Emani's care, and as I've said, she apparently loved her own 2 kids. She idolised these kids. They were well fed, they were well kept, they were well loved. Not so much for Emani. Emani didn't get to see that side of Tiffany. She didn't get to enjoy that side of Tiffany. Tiffany had no time for Emani whatsoever. Okay. Now we get to July of 2012. All right. And Emani's age 9 at this point, and she runs away from home. She's 9 years old. Okay. And she runs to the apartment manager. All right. And she tells them that she doesn't want to go home because Tiffany had just tied her up in the shower and held her under cold water in the shower, that she'd been getting beaten and that she was mean to her, and she doesn't want to go home. Okay. Now Tiffany, when she comes down, she's lowing, taking a notice of her, and apparently Tiffany was believed. I've no words. Now later on that was quite early on in July. All right. So later on in the month, Emani runs away again. So that's twice in a month. All right. And she runs, and fortunately, I think, or I don't know how you'd word it, but she's found later on, early hours of that going into the next day, in some bushes in an apartment complex. And she's found by a police officer, and she tells him, I don't want to go home. My stepmom, Tiffany, she's mean to me. She hurts me. And what he does, he files a runaway and curfew violation, okay? And it's a charge against Emani herself, and you might be like, hold on a minute. But the reason he does it, and I believe we've had this in another story I've done, he does it to try and ensure that she's brought before a juvenile judge, okay? Now, the problem with this is the Moss family, obviously Iman, Tiffany, the 2 kids, and little Emani, they're moving around a lot during this time period. Okay, it said between 2011 to around 2013, they move around a lot. Okay, and although the orders put out for Emani and child services are involved, it becomes a case of, oh, we can't find them, they've moved, we don't know where they are, and she just falls through the cracks again. Okay, now they would live with extended family, okay, during these moving around, but every time they would get a place where it's just them living there, people wouldn't see Emani, and they'd see she'd have bruises on her. She was becoming quite introverted from this quite outgoing little girl. She was becoming a lot more timid, was the word that was used. She was becoming thinner. She was losing a lot of weight. Okay. And we come to May 2013, and Emani's age 10. Okay. And they would go to visit Iman's family for Mother's Day. America's Mother's Day must be in May, obviously ours is March, April, but they go to visit. And it's actually his sister's home. His sister's called Sharonese, all right? And Robin, Iman's mum, is living with Sharonice, his sister, her daughter, okay, over this time period. So Iman takes his kids with Imani and, of course, Tiffany, and they go there for the day. And as soon as Robin and Sharonice see Imani, they just get the shock of their lives. They can't believe what they're seeing. Not only, as I've said, she's losing a lot of weight to the point where they said her bones were protruding through her shirt. All her beautiful hair. Do you remember I said she liked to have her hair in braids, and she loved the fact that she had long hair? All her hair had been cut off. She'd cut all her hair off. And Robin, upon seeing this, and also knowing how much Imani loved her hair, she went straight for Tiffany, and she's like, what have you done to her? Why have you cut her hair? And you want to know what Tiffany said? If you act ugly, you should look ugly. That was her response to the grandmother of this little girl. Now, all I can think is Iman, she would have said that to him. He would have saw that his daughter's, all her hair's been chopped off. But this man, I don't know what to make of him at all. Well, I do. He's just a sap. A complete and utter sap. That's the nicest word I can use for him. Okay. Now, this would be the last time the family, the extended family, would see Imani. All right. And when it was time for Imani to return to school, because this is the American summer holidays over this time period, Tiffany and Iman got in touch with the school and advised them that they would now be homeschooling Imani. Isn't that always, is that not red flag? I actually wrote here red flag 103 of this story, but it's one of the biggest ones. Oh my goodness. And when Sharonice, Iman's sister, so Imani's auntie, heard about this, she calls child services and she asks them to step in and to stop this. Because I think they had some sort of security, thinking that if Imani was going into school, that I think they were hoping that if she was getting worse, that the school would intervene. Well, they weren't going to get the opportunity to intervene anymore. And although child services were notified, they didn't do anything. Nothing at all. No surprise there. We get to the 6th of August 2013. There's an anonymous call made to child services saying that Imani was being neglected. Nothing done. Nothing done again. Can't find them. They're moving around. No real effort made to try and help this little girl, even though her stepmother, who she's living back with, was charged with abusing her. Now we come to the end of August in 2013, okay? And the family moved to Lawrenceville, Georgia, all right? To a new apartment. And Imani would never leave. Once she stepped foot in that apartment, she never got to leave it again. And for all intents and purposes, I've heard the term used, she just vanishes from the earth. No one sees her again. All right? And because shortly after moving into this new apartment, and I would presume what was put across as a new fresh start for the family, Tiffany would begin in all earnestness to starve Imani. Now, given the fact she was so thin when Robin and Sharonice had seen her, this was already in process. But now she went all out. She just stopped feeding her. She just stopped. She just decided not to. Now, what she would do is while a man was at work, she'd send pictures of the meals she was cooking. Oh, she would. Or she'd ask him to bring like cookie dough home so she could make cookies for the family. It was said the smell of those cookies being cooked would have been so traumatic for that little girl, so traumatizing, because she would have been in a lot of pain now from hunger pangs. She was not feeding her at all. And she was made to stay in her bedroom. She wasn't allowed to come out of her bedroom. Okay? And this went on over a period of weeks. Weeks. She was starving her. And then it'd get to the point where she was becoming too weak to even get out of her bed. She couldn't even make it to the toilet. And she's just been left. She was just being left in her own waste. This is how bad it had gotten. And yeah, she would have just been in agony from the starvation. And imagine smelling cookies being baked, or just food in general, and hearing your little brother and sister running around and playing and being loved by their mom, and just being aware that that love wasn't for you. You weren't allowed that love. You had to stay in that bedroom till you couldn't physically move out of your bed anymore. Now we come to the 24th of October 2013, okay? Now Iman, on this particular day, he'd been at work, but he was having trouble with his truck. And he'd gone on to his second job. But when he got there, his truck really just clapped out. So his boss left him, his supervisor let him leave early to be able to fix his truck. So he limps the truck home, and he's outside and he's fixing his truck. And he comes in to the apartment about 10 o'clock on the night. And he said he was quite dirty and he wanted to go in and clean up and stuff. And it was only then that Tiffany says, there's something wrong with Emani. She's in the bath. And when he goes into the bathroom, Emani is in the bath. And she's in the middle of a seizure. He'd said that this would have been brought on by the starvation. Okay. It would have gone from hunger pangs to fatigue to now she's experiencing seizures. Her body's shutting down. Okay. And rather than calling 911, rather than doing that, okay, didn't do that. He simply carries her out, gets her out of the bath, wraps her up, and carries her back to her bed. Her disgusting bed, by the way. And he puts her back to bed, where she, in the process of the next 4 days, is dying. This little girl is dying in her bed. She's 10 years old. And the most her so-called dad, does for her, he tries to feed her. Now, I'm assuming he must have had a weekend where he could come back, where he was off over that time period. So he tried to feed her, but it was too little too late. There was... Maybe if they'd have called 911 then, maybe they could have helped her. Maybe. They don't even know if she was beyond help then. But he could have tried, but he didn't. And we come up to the 28th of October 2013, so 4 days later, as I've said. And Emani Gabrielle Moss died alone in her bedroom. age 10. For what? Why? Now, Tiffany calls him on at work and she just simply says she's gone. She's gone. And rather than rushing home, because he knew what she meant when she said that, rather than rushing home to see if there was anything he could do, he finished out his shift at work. And when he was asked about it, he said, well, they wouldn't have let me leave again. They wouldn't have let you leave to get home to your dead daughter. You think you don't think they'd let you go? Now I know we've got some brutal work, laws out there and procedures, but oh my God, I think they'd have let you go. Now he finishes his shift, and when he comes back, he says he walked into what looked like a perfectly normal house. Tiffany's watching TV. His little son and daughter is running around, just playing. Perfectly normal situation that he walks into, okay? But then he goes into Emani's bedroom, and there she is on the floor, on like a blanket, quite obviously dead. He was asked, how did you know? He's like, she was dead. She was cold. So how long? We don't know. Now, he says he was going to call 911. He's going to do it again. He was going to call 911. Yes, he was. Of course he was. But then Tiffany said they'd lose their kids. They would lose their kids if he called 911. So, they're in it now. What is it? They're in this criminal life now. That's what she said to him. So Eman moves Emani to the computer room, and he would leave her there for the next couple of days. And when he would come home from work, he would sit with her body. And he was said it was his period of his grief. It was while he was grieving over her. What? Okay. Now, then they decided, the two of them, they decide they're going to cremate. They're going to cremate Emani and then report her as a runaway. Just despicable. So when I was calling this man a sap, he was a sap probably up to about 10 minutes ago. Now, he's disgusting as hell. He's worse. Just like in these cases where it's a stepdad and you've got the mum allowing things to, abuse to happen. Now we've got the dad allowing it. So in my mind, he's worse. So Eman then, he goes out and he buys a trash can, and he buys trash bags and charcoal and lighter fluid. What a set, eh? And we get to the 31st of October 2013, Halloween. Okay, so it's 3 days after Emani has died. And they then begin the process of trying to put Emani into a trash bag. His little girl. And rigor mortis. Her body's now in a state of rigor mortis. Okay? So they're trying to fold her into this trash bag. Okay? And they try duct taping her to get her in there. And when she doesn't quite fit, they then begin breaking her bones to get her into the bag. And once she's in a trash bag, and this trash bag has been tied up, they then get all the bedding that had been soiled from her being left in her own waste. They get the clothing that she had been wearing, and they put that in another trash bag. And then they put the trash bags in his truck along with the trash bin, the trash can that they bought. They put that in the truck. Then they get their 2 children, put them in the truck, and then they go on a drive to a secluded area, okay, to perform this cremation of his little girl. And they get out the truck and they put these charcoal briquettes at the bottom of the trash can, at the bin, bottom of the bin. They then take Emani out of the bag and they put her in the bin. Oh my God, saying these words. Oh God. Then he pours lighter fluid all over her, and then he sets her alight. And quite quickly, he'd said about 5 minutes, they both begin to realise that, well, cremation isn't that easy. And it needs to be a lot hotter than what that trash can is. Okay? I've heard that it can take up to an actual cremation can take up to 90 minutes with all the correct equipment. Okay? And after 5 minutes, they're like, oh, this isn't going to work. But they burnt that little girl. So then they decide, right, okay, well, this hasn't worked. So they, all I can think is put the lid on the trash can, load it back onto the truck with little Emani in it. Beaten, broken, burnt, deceased, with her younger brother and sister in the truck. I mean, luckily, I believe they were very, very young. Very, very young. I believe that her brother was 3 at this time and the sister was younger. You know, so they wouldn't have been aware. But that, what kind of mentality to have? And they do this. They load the truck back up and they head back to the apartment. And they go back into the apartment and leave Emani's body in the trash can, in the truck. Oh my God. He then goes to work the next day with Emani's body in the truck, in the trash can. And while he's there, guilt starts to kick in, conscience. Oh, I don't know what it is. I don't know what it is. Is it fear of being caught? Is it guilt? Is his conscience? I don't know. But he gets in touch with his best friend, who's apparently his cousin. And he confides in him what he's done. And of course, this best friend / cousin is like mortified and like, phone the police. But it still takes him till about 4 o'clock that morning before he decides he's going to do that. Now, all I can assume is he gave Tiffany the heads up that that's what he was going to do, which says to me he wasn't scared of her all along and he could have phoned the police all along. Now, Tiffany, she gets up, she packs her kids up, she gets them dressed, and she leaves the apartment and goes to her parents with the kids. Okay. Now, Eman phones 911. He says that he is he's suicidal. When the police come out, he says, look, my daughter had drank chemicals and she died and we didn't know what to do, so we tried to cremate her. And then the police look to the side of him, outside the apartment, on like a grass verge, and there's this trash can. And they look in it, and there's the body of little Emani. Of course they arrest him there and then. Of course they do. Tiffany, after she'd dropped her kids off at her mum, she hands herself in. She knows that's it. Where's she gonna go? Okay. Now the autopsy that was done on little Emani, obviously what it showed is she was not just underweight, of course, she's severely underweight. To the point, I'm going to tell you what this little girl weighed. She was 10. She was 10 years old and she weighed 32 pounds. She wasn't even 2.5 stone. My child at 18 months weighed that. Now, he was a big boy. I'll say that. And they do say that weight is the average, say, 3-year-old. I did have a big boy, but okay, average 3-year-old. She was 10, 32 pounds. It says that her organs inside were also very, very small. Her liver had actually been eating itself, and the pathologist, basically said she would have been in absolute agony. She would have been in terrible pain from the hunger. Apparently, it's a real crippling thing to go through before fatigue kicked in, and then the seizures, and then death. Oh, God. In 2015, Iman pled guilty. Okay, he took a plea deal to take the death sentence off the table, and he pled guilty to felony murder and concealing a death. He was given life with no parole. Plus, he also had to testify against Tiffany. Okay, so it took longer with Tiffany, and we come up to the 15th of April 2019. All right, before Tiffany's trial began. Now, Tiffany waived all defence lawyers. She wanted no public defence lawyers. She wanted no help. She was gonna defend herself. Yes, she was. I can defend myself. Okay. No. She hadn't studied law in any way, but she was going to defend herself. Now, apparently she was supposed to represent herself, but when it comes to the opening statements at the trial, and I've watched the opening, I've watched the closing, I've watched hours of this trial, she doesn't say a word. She doesn't make an opening statement. She doesn't cross-examine any of the 18 witnesses that were brought forward. She doesn't bring any witnesses of her own. No character witnesses, no one. She doesn't make a closing statement. And I mean, the prosecution's closing statement was, it was scathing. It was, I thought she was fantastic. The prosecution district attorney was called Lisa Jones. Thought she was great. But on the 29th of April 2019, she's found guilty of malice murder, felony murder, cruelty to children, and concealing a death. Okay? And very quickly, she was sentenced to death. I'm so happy about that. He should have been too, but he took a plea deal. I don't know what she was doing. I don't know what her mind frame was. I don't understand. I don't get her decision. But she's the only woman in Georgia on death row at the moment. Now, she's still exhausting her appeals. And it's only since the appeals then she's decided that she now wants representation. I don't know why not at the original trial, but do-gooders have come forward and gone, well, she wasn't in the right mind. She can't have been in the right mind if she wanted to represent herself. So that trial needs to be null and void kind of thing. Now I haven't got any news on that. No decision's been made on that at the moment. So she's still on death row, and like I say, she's the only woman in Georgia on death row at the moment. Obviously, if I do have any updates to these appeals, I will let you know. I genuinely hope these appeals go nowhere. I don't know how any of this can be argued whatsoever. I really don't. Now, the two kids, Aman and Tiffany's biological children, little Amani's half siblings, they were taken into foster care from Tiffany's mum's house. Do you remember that's where she dropped them? They were taken into foster care, and then there was a fight between Iman's family and Tiffany's family to try and take custody of these children, but it wasn't agreed, and I understand why. I do, in a way, because you know, they're so young that they can be distanced from what's happened, from the trauma of what happened, and the foster parents that actually took them in have now adopted them, and their names and all their details, those records have been sealed by the court. So all I can hope is that they do go on to have, a good life, and it does say that they are doing well. The two children are, but that's it. That's all I know about them. That's why I haven't mentioned their names. Like I say, in the trial, their names are used. There's no reason to mention their names whatsoever. I mean, I would presume their names have maybe been changed now, but yeah, that was the horrific Emani Moss story. And she just such a beautiful little girl. And it just, everything you see about just teachers, everyone who spoke about us just said she was just a delight, just a beautiful little girl. What a shame. And apparently this is called the Cinderella effect. I don't know what the difference is between that and the scapegoat, and it's still a child that you're zoning in on, that you're singling out for a punishment, whether it's physical, starvation, mental, neglect, whatever it may be. The end result always seems to be the same in these stories. So, but that's what they've called it. And yeah, thank you so much for joining me. I genuinely do appreciate it. I'm here every Tuesday and Thursday, 8 p.m. If you'd like to pop a like or subscribe, I'd really appreciate that. But yeah, thank you so much for joining me, and I'll see you soon. Thank you. Take care.